Code.
Good morning, welcome, good afternoon for those of you joining us from the West Coast. Here we are at step number 9. Wow, it feels like just yesterday we started this series, so very cool. So again, those of you who are returning, welcome back, and those of you who are just joining us for this first time, welcome. For anyone who missed any of the sessions, we do have them recorded, and if you're listening to me now, you've joined the webinar and you'll be receiving links to the previous ones. So we'll go ahead and get started. My name is David Donaldson. I'll be your host today. And as always, we have the wonderful Lauren Connor on support, sound and technology. So anytime we do a webinar, there's sometimes issues. If you're having any issues, please just use the question or the chat window. Lauren's monitoring that. Send her a quick hello. If you are having difficulties and we're not able to resolve them, just a reminder, we do have the recordings and you can always watch those later. Our control panel off to the side, so just a quick reminder, the top red arrow there will allow you to collapse it down so that you can kind of move that out of the way and give you some more real estate on screen. There's the chat window allowing you to fill in the chats and, ask questions, answer questions, that kind of thing. And we will be utilizing that quite a bit through today because we have a number of questions for you to answer. And as always, I'd like to try to make these sessions as interactive as possible. And if you're having any issues, you can always raise your hand, put your hand up and say, hey, what's going on? Okay, and then finally, when you see this icon, that's your turn to provide some input to us and kind of let us know what's going on. Good. Okay, cool. As we do, we're going to start with an opening thought. And as I put this session together, all 10 of them in fact, I was trying to come up with some creative opening thoughts. And I was reading a book a couple weeks ago called The Survivor's Club. And it's a fascinating book. And one of the people that the author interviewed was Edie Egger, who is an Auschwitz survivor. Now, she went there as a 16-year-old, and on the first day, she was about 40 pounds apparently, and on the first day, she was separated from her mom, and unfortunately, her mom didn't survive the experience, but her and her sister did. And the quote that I'm using today was from her and attributing her experience, and basically she says, when you can't fight or flee, you flow. So I was listening to this book, and she was talking about what survival meant to her and how she survived through that. And survival really meant adapting to each new day, and it was this kind of flexibility that she accredits to being able to survive that experience. Now, it didn't make her invulnerable to the firing squad or typhoid, but to what extent she did have control, she remained flexible, she remained adaptable, and she believes that that flow and that flexibility gave her that edge that helped her survive. So it's a very fascinating story, but how does this apply to project management? Well, as we think about getting into the execution of our project and how we can make this thing work and actually get to the end, a big area that I see as a key success factor is the ability to flow, or the ability to be flexible and kind of go with the flow. And unfortunately, we almost set ourselves up for not being able to do that because we get so caught up in timelines and costing and scope, and we try to lock this thing down. And meanwhile, yes, we want to identify that, especially the end state, but we also need to have that flexibility that as things go along, when things aren't quite working out as they should, we have that ability to flow. Okay, so that's just going to be our kind of opening thought. Now, as we've been doing, looking at the challenges from the first session, and I've highlighted the ones that are kind of going to be relevant here. Communication, as always, I think we've highlighted that in all 9 of the steps so far. Getting support from senior management. Now, support from senior management is kind of like we need it at the beginning to get things started, but then we need it at the end as we start to do the execution. People conflicts, now this is where it's really going to come to a head. Time constraints as well. I often say you need to be bipolar as a project manager. During the planning phase, it's whoa cowboy, let's slow down and think about this. And now that we step into execution, it's giddy up, let's get the job done. And then finally, I thought, sticking to previous decisions is kind of become really relevant in this topic, as we need to make sure that we are sticking to those decisions so that we can move forward, which almost seems contradictory to our quote for this session. Having that flexibility and going with the flow. So we need to find that right balance, because to me, sticking with decisions is more about kind of, staying with that end state and kind of fixing, locking into that while still remaining flexible in kind of how we get there. So we're gonna explore that concept a little bit. So just to remind us, we're on step number 9, which is track and manage our project execution. We'll put this in the context of our 10 steps. So we've got one more step coming up next month for the post-project review and close. Looking forward to that. Now that we've finished through steps 2 through 8 of all of the planning and the details of the planning and the scope, the time, the costing, the risk, and getting that approved as we did last session through the baselining process, we're now ready to start executing. So we're actually going to transition from planning, which is the whoa cowboy part, to execution, which is the giddy up. And this is an area where I find really, instilling that sense of urgency starts to become a very key tool for us. So I'm going to, first of all, right off the top, pose a question. What gets in the way? So, and when I say what gets in the way, I'm talking about what gets in the way of executing your projects successfully. So give everyone a few moments to answer that. If you can just answer in the question box. Lauren, we've got that up. Yep, awesome. Oh, we've got some already. Time needed for decisions to be made. Excellent, Jordan. Yes, because we often forget, how long it takes to make a decision. And that's something we could actually think about when we're thinking about being realistic in our planning to make sure that we have room there for that. Roberta, resources. I'm guessing, Roberta, what you're thinking there is what gets in the way from the standpoint of having the resources available. So if you can expand on that a little bit, would be great. Changes in priorities from Maria. Yes, absolutely. Oh, they're flowing fast and furious now. And yeah, so our priorities do change as we go through our projects. Absolutely. So reactionary decisions. Oh, love that one. Yes, Sarah. Reactionary decisions that present unexpected consequences or don't end up resolving a problem. Oh, thank you so much. That's a beautiful answer. I love it. We need to find it, but we also have to make sure that we're not getting into analysis paralysis. So we got to kind of find that right balance. But I think reactionary is the very key word there. Unforeseen things from Bill, absolutely, right? We talked about that in risk. Commitment and availability. Yes, okay, absolutely, Roberta. Thank you for clarification there. So yes, having that commitment, having the availability, and having people really committed at a motivational, or what I like to call a heart level, as opposed to the intellectual, yeah, I'll do that work. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. Short of funding, yes, Ken, absolutely. And regulatory change from Shabir. Apologies if I got your name wrong. Shabir. Yeah, especially in this highly regulated world, and if you're working in something that is very highly regulated, like financial or nuclear energy or aviation or something like that, it can be a very, very tough thing. Yeah, beautiful. And that's where, looking back on Edie's quote at the beginning here, having that flexibility to go with the flow can be very powerful tool, very powerful tool. And from Sandra, leadership changes. Yes, we're actually going to talk a fair amount about leadership today as we go through our session. So some great answers to that. Thank you so much. So here's what I see as getting in the way. First off, communication. We identified communication as being a big factor, both from the success and the challenges that we tend to face. Leadership, again, another key one, which then directly leads into things like your stakeholders, managing those expectations, your team members, and of course the plan itself. can also be a factor that gets in the way. Did I properly plan this out? Have I overplanned it? Have I underplanned it? Do I have an effective plan? Is it realistic? Those sorts of things. So the image I chose for this slide was the bookends. And really kind of what I look at in execution is, we look at the focus around project management. It often gets very technical. It gets very, 47 processes and 10 knowledge areas and yada, yada, yada. And that is really a very key important piece, our plan, for sure. But it's really kind of one half. And if we don't have both the plan and the leadership, if we don't have both of those kind of balancing out, it's kind of like missing one of the ends. So we need both bookends to be able to really effectively execute our project. So, excuse me, I'm going to give you the next question. What does perfect execution look like? And here I'm representing our plan with a straight line. So we've got the start, we've got the finish. What does perfect execution look like to you? Okay, just waiting for some responses to come in. This is going to be a tough one to articulate in words, isn't it? Yeah. On time and on target. Some good planning. Okay, so the good planning going into allowing us to do those other things on time and on target from Leela. Okay. You did what you said within the schedule and cost, and people know what they were expecting along the way. Nicely said, Jordan. I like that. Absolutely. Risks were mitigated. Yep. From Shabir. Absolutely. Oh, love this one from Roberta. A satisfied customer / stakeholder. Beautiful. Love it. Yeah. We need to be cautious with the whole on time, on target thing. We can often lose sight of what the real objective is, so we want to make sure that we find that right balance there. You met stakeholder expectations from Maria. Yes, very nice. Love that one. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Managing the life cycles of a project within expectations. Yes, beautiful, Sarah, absolutely. Minimal or low stress issues. Smooth, everything going as planned from Sandra. Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? And occasionally it does happen. Once in a while we get there. So it's, we can definitely, we'll look at some ways to sort of move towards that. All right. Some fabulous answers. So here's how I like to represent perfect execution. As the animation plays, there we go. Now, usually when we're having this discussion in class and we kind of have a bit more of interaction, I ask that question, well, what makes this perfect execution? And you notice that we didn't necessarily on time or on target, whether that red line represents our time versus the blue line time, or if it's money, or whatever that looks like. The thing that makes this perfect execution, though, is that we finished. We got to that end state. And this is kind of what I was thinking when I was thinking about the quote from Edie. You can't fight or flee, you flow. Right? So we need to be flexible. So we often are in that situation as project managers where we're being kind of backed into a corner a little bit as we are given constraints, sometimes unreasonable constraints, and we're trying to make it all work. We have little to no authority. We're at the whim of decision makers from higher up, those sorts of things. And we really start to, need to have that ability to be flexible and go with the flow. But all the while, we still need to be very laser focused on the end state. That's, as I heard Edie's story, it was really what really came through to me is she was very laser focused on, in her case, basic survival. And, that was actually a theme going throughout this book, The Survivors Club, where one thing he found with all of the people that he interviewed and all of the survivors that he talked to, there was a very high focus around, ensuring that they basically survived, So, and having that flexibility to kind of, go with the flow. Okay, so our next question. Okay, so now that we've identified what perfect execution is, how do we do it? Now, there's a lot of good experience out there. So what I'd like to do is just, popcorn out. what are some of the things that you have done in the past or that you think would be good things to do to help deliver that perfect execution? I know, another tough one, eh? All right, so we got some good responses coming in. Wow, okay, that was coming fast and furious. All right, good communication, constant updates from William, absolutely. And I think the key there is good communication. Sometimes more is less, right? Constantly remind others of the end goal. Yes, beautiful, Daryl, staying focused on that end state. Reaching and maintaining alignment with stakeholders throughout the project lifecycle from Gabriel. Yes, beautiful, absolutely. Managing stakeholder expectations. I know it was, there's a higher focus on that in PMBOK 5th edition. Really happy to see that. If you deliver what people are expecting, they might not necessarily be happy, but they'll be accepting. They'll pay the bill. They'll be, this is what I was expecting, and yeah, beautiful, love it. Okay, plan for buffers such as critical stage to allow breathing room to bad things to deal with, unexpected circumstances from Sarah. Yes, absolutely. We are often so pressured to get this thing done faster, get it done quicker, get it done cheaper. We need to make sure that we're being realistic and that we have some room to maneuver and to move. And, it takes a lot more resources to maneuver extremely tightly. If you could imagine trying to drive a ship, like an ocean liner, and you're out in the middle of the ocean, you've got lots of room to maneuver. You've got lots of room to make a mistake and drift off to one side or the other. But when you get into a tight harbor, and you're going down a river, you're going into a harbor, you're coming into the dock, it's a very different experience. And in fact, what they often do is put what's called a pilot on board. Someone who knows the local port, knows the currents, knows how to navigate, and the captain will turn the ship over to the pilot, and it's their job to navigate those tight waters. So when you get into circumstances in your projects where it is very close quarters and very tight, and you don't have that wiggle room, you don't have that breathing room, you need to increase your resources. And oftentimes we're told, well, no, you're not going to get more resources to do that. So, having that ability to be able to do that would be really nice. Regular communication, sponsor stakeholders. Yep, absolutely, Roberta, thank you. Remembering to approach the work, appreciate the work is going to finish, from Sarah. Oh, yes, lovely. Yeah, how many projects have we been on that felt like they're never going to end? Yeah, I think you might be on one of those projects right now. Listen to what other people's concerns are and work on them, from Ken. Yes, absolutely. We talked about this in previous scenarios or previous sessions where we looked at that whole concept around the others, the team that's there and to manage the team, because really they are kind of key. Clearly define the scope. Yep, absolutely, Ron. If there's any changes, follow the proper change management process. Huge thing, following our processes. And I'm not really talking about necessarily following the plan, because the plan should have flexibility, but following the process so that we know how we initiate that change and deal with that. Absolutely. Senior management engagement. Absolutely. Celebrate the wins, from Sandra. Yes. Yeah, we're going to go into great detail on that one next week or next month when we get together again. Have a clear definition of roles, responsibilities. From Maria, absolutely. And then manage stakeholders, communicate up and down and laterally. Don't skip the WBS. Oh, yay. Yes, preaching to the choir, I think. Good planning, monitor, control, absolutely. And then finally from Sandra, making sure you have the right people in the right place. Yes, absolutely. And we're actually going to be exploring that concept a little bit as we progress through today. Yeah, if you don't have the right people, it can really make things challenging. Absolutely. Fabulous. Okay. So here's some of the, there we go. Perfect execution. So here's some of the pieces that I put together from my perspective. Number one, addressing the issues in a timely fashion. there's a great book on leadership that I regularly reread called It's Our Ship, and it's written by a former U.S. Navy captain who had the highest on-time, on-station record in the Navy, like completely unheard of what this guy did. I think in the 4 or 5 years he was in command of the ship, they only had to turn back and couldn't go out on exercises once, which is like completely unheard of. And one of the ways he attributed to being able to achieve that very exemplary record was when people brought him issues. Yes, there was the classic, come to me with solutions and that sort of thing. But the first question he always asked was, how long have you known about this? Because if you can address those issues in a timely fashion, as I like to say, listen to the whispers, you don't have to hear the screams, then you can be far more effective. You can engage the team, you can bring the right people in place. And the one time they had to turn back, they were heading out to sea to go out on maneuvers, and a key piece of equipment on board was not operational. And when he talked to the chief of that area and said, how long have you known about this? The answer came back a very sheepish 2 weeks. Well, they were in port for 2 weeks. They had all kinds of resources to get people in to, fix this thing before they headed out to sea. Now that they've left port and they're steaming out into the ocean, they've got no support outside of their ship. So they couldn't fix it internally. They had to turn back. And if you can really encourage your team to be open and honest on a very timely fashion, which leads directly to our next point, communication. And I put the word effective in there. More communication, less communication, that's all very situational. So really it's about being effective. And if it's not working, change it up, whether that means increasing it or decreasing it or changing the venue or the medium or, whatever that looks like. Manage the project that's in front of you. Now, this is an interesting concept. Let's think about, a project that you're on, similar to a previous project, but perhaps the priorities are different. Okay, so we'll use the Y2K example, right? Time was our number one priority. Okay, time was our absolute number one priority in the Y2K scenario. Now, what I see, though, is a lot of people running projects like they're all Y2K. Now, we need to make sure that we're managing the project that's in front of us. So if we have something that is a very tight time deadline, great, awesome, let's tackle it. But, let's not run every project like it's a Y2K project. So we really need to manage the project that's in front of us. And then, as has already been identified, priorities change along the way. Focus on the why, not as much on the what. And yes, we need to define our scope. We need to, tighten that down and then hence deliver that. But this is the old forest for the trees thing, where if I've lost sight of the why I'm doing this, then my what, can be off track. And decision making is much, much easier when I know the why. Okay? And then finally, pace yourself accordingly. Again, this is another pet peeve of mine. I see people running when they're doing a 3-year project. So think about this. What pace do marathoners run their race at? And then think about what pace do sprinters run their race at? And then I want you to think about how successful a marathoner is going to be if they run the entire race or attempt to run the entire race at a sprinting pace. Totally agree. There's going to be times during that marathon when you are going to sprint. But if we don't run it at an appropriate pace, we're going to either disengage people because we're just going too slow, right, hence run that sprint, or worse, we're going to burn people out because we're trying to run the entire 3 or 5 year project at a sprinting pace. And yes, you can sprint. Totally agree, and there's absolutely appropriate times for that. But then you also have to look at the balance. So to give you a quick example, when I used to work at a major financial and manage a technology group there, our year end was an all hands on deck work through the weekend scenario. Well, guess what I didn't expect from my team Monday and Tuesday of the next week? There needed to be that balance. And I see people do this with projects over and over again. They get into these long-term, projects, and then they try to run them like the short-term small projects. So you want to really kind of, find the appropriate pace for the project, and then run it in that way. And of course, that can involve some negotiation with management, et cetera, to get the appropriate resources. Now, finally, and I added this additional point here, manage the expectations. Because really, at the end of the day, you can deliver late, you can deliver over budget, and people can be accepting of that if they're understanding what's going on. You can manage projects in a high-risk environment, again, if people understand what's going on. Because if you're doing an R&D type project, expect failures. That's the nature of the beast. And what you want to do, though, is you want to make sure that those failures are positioned well, the expectations are there. So hence, when they occur, it's not a surprise to anyone. We know that that's what's going on. We're okay, and we're prepared to deal with it. And being prepared to deal with it can be from the standpoint of, I have a contingency plan, on the technical side, or quite simply, I'm just, emotionally, intellectually ready to just, accept that, hey, you know what, that's the nature of the beast, and we had a hiccup, and let's continue on, right? Okay. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about something called the hedgehog concept. And this was kind of popularized by Jim Collins in his series of books, Good to Great, Built to Last. And there's a third one in there, and it's just jumping out of my head. Anyways, the hedgehog concept is when they looked at successful organizations, they found that there were three things that were there. Number one was passion. So, what are we passionate about? Number two was, what are we good at? What are we number one in the world at? And third item was, what drives our economic engine? And he dubbed this the hedgehog concept. So when these three come together, that's when the magic happens. That's when you tend to see the success. Now, the hedgehog name comes from the old fable of the fox and the hedgehog. And the basic concept behind, or the basic underlying principle behind that, is that the fox is very good at doing a whole bunch of things. The hedgehog is really good at only doing one thing. So when the fox encountered the hedgehog did what it does, which is rolls up into a ball and protects itself. And the fox tried to use all of its various tricks to, get it lunch, basically. And it couldn't. Now, the reason for this was not that the fox was not capable. It's just that the hedgehog was extremely capable of what it was planning to do. So I did a little quick bit of research on this, and it was originally attributed to an ancient Greek poet named Archilochius. So probably got that pronunciation wrong. But it's funny that it kind of goes back that far. Now, if we put this into a project concept, the first question we want to ask is, are we passionate about this project? Are we aligned to its goals? And when I say that, what I mean is, does it speak to us? So think about a project that you've been on where there was something about that project that you said, yeah, this is really good and really important, and I'm in, right? So are we there? Do we have that passion? The next question is, how does this project benefit the organization? So hence, this is our economic alignment. So that alignment can be it can be tangible, it can be intangible, it can be ROI, however you want to label it, but there's got to be some benefit here, right? And if this project is not benefiting the organization, you're not going to get senior management support, you're not going to get people buying in, things are going to fizzle, right? And that's why I love this hedgehog concept, because he actually labels it as not how you can make money, it's what drives your economic engine. Because what drives your economic engine could be, I create a product and sell it, or it could be I create funding opportunities, or I get funding from government if I'm a non-for-profit or an NGO or something like that. And then finally, what are we best in the world at? So are we good at what we do? Do we have the right skills in place? And if we think about this from a project perspective, passion, do I have people who are motivated, who want to do this project, that are there from a heart perspective, not a logic perspective? Do I have the right ROI? Am I creating some benefit here that's actually going to move the organization forward in whatever fashion that looks like? And then finally, do I have the right people on the bus, right? Do I have the skill sets that I need? Are we good at what we do? Because if I'm good at what I do, if I'm passionate about what I do, and by the way, I get that return on the investment, drives the economic engine, make money, however you want to label that, when I have those three factors come together, that's when things really work. And the more I kind of looked at this and thought about it in terms of a project perspective, I thought, what, this model holds up. So I want to put that out there. Now we're going to go to our next question, which is how can we create or support our hedgehogs? Okay, so we've got our 3 areas, and let's think about how we can support and or create our hedgehogs in Project World. Kickoff meeting, awesome, yes. Let's start at the beginning, shall we? Thanks, Will. Kickoff meeting, yeah. So right off the top, now this is going to help address passion, right? This is going to help address what drives our economic engine, because you want to get people engaged and get them excited, right? Clearly articulating the objectives and goals and what it means to the company. Yes, thank you. So thank you, Sarah, for expanding on that, because if I clearly articulate, I'm sorry, that was Roberta, my apologies. If I clearly articulate the goals, people might not necessarily create the connections that we might. We've got to remember, those goals and objectives might have been created by someone at the higher end, at upper management, and now we're starting to speak to someone who's middle management or frontline staff. They might not create those connections, so it might need to be spelled out a little bit. From Sarah, engage the right people. If the passion isn't there, then they're the wrong people in place. Yes, and the other areas will suffer. Oh, yes, Sarah. It's a simple concept, but I'll tell you, it's tough to do. We definitely, yeah, beautiful. Identifying roles, responsibilities, also very important from Will. Again, thank you. Yes, 100% agree. Making sure that people know where they are. People have a hard time getting passionate about things if they're not really if it's unknown. And there's a concept in neuroscience called towards and away. And our brain is constantly about 5 times a second making the decision or evaluating, should I go towards this or should I go away from it? And it's a basic survival instinct. So here's how it kind of works. Something presents itself to you. So let's say someone walks through the door of your office. Your brain at a very base level is saying, is this a friend? Should I move towards this person, or is this an enemy or foe? I need to move away, right? And you're constantly redoing that. So when we get the wrong people in place, we create an away environment, right? We get the right people in place, we create a towards environment. That's part of the reason why when you get that right team in place, it almost builds, like the whole becomes more than the sum of the parts, right? So identifying the roles and responsibilities, what that helps us do is it helps us create a safe place, which is a towards response. And then people want to be there. When I have vague roles and responsibilities, what ends up happening is our brain defaults to the negative. Again, survival instinct. If you think about your ancestors, thousands of years ago, they're huddling in the cave for warmth and shelter, and you hear a noise outside. If those who thought, oh, hey, well, let's default to a positive and let's go out and investigate, got eaten by the lion, those who defaulted to the negative stayed safe in the cave. So, when we don't have all the information, we tend to default to a negative. Recognize the contributors from Ken, absolutely. And again, that also builds on that whole towards and away thing. Combine and align employee and business growth goals. Yes, from Gabriel. Very good point there. And this kind of helps us drive the passion, because if it's something towards my personal goals, I'm going to be much more engaged around that. And again, if I'm also building towards my personal goals, I'm probably pretty good at this, right? And that can also help us with the whole economic return on investment piece, because now I'm not only building towards the organization, but I'm actually building the organization itself. Carry out team building activities from Edwin. Yeah, absolutely. Highly, highly underrated. And let me just share a quick experience with you on that one. With a team, it was at one of the banks. It was around Sarbanes-Oxley, and we met every Friday for an hour between 11 and noon. There's about 60 people around the table. Now, this meeting wasn't mandatory, but everyone showed up. It was kind of one of those sort of unspoken mandatories. But half of the meeting, the first half, was honestly just fun. We would talk about local news items, anyone who had any news within the organization, so we'd celebrate Karen's birthday. We just have fun stories. We create connections, that kind of thing. And so we'd spend half of our time doing team building, and then the other half of the time was, get down to business. But I can tell you something. I think I was there about 2 years. In the time that I was there, I watched this team transform from 6 warring factions to basically a big happy family. So it was a phenomenal experience, and it really does pay off. So yeah, I can't understate that one enough, or overstate that one enough. Excuse me. Show unwavered support. Be motivated in your communication, your vocal tone, your body language. Oh yeah, that's a great one, Sabir. And this really goes directly back to that first bubble at the top, passion. If we are not passionate about what we're doing, how can we create that passion, and how can we, foster it? So, in that experience I was telling you about with the team building in the weekly, the Friday meeting, when the leader of that team, kind of realized that he was starting to lose his passion, and I give him a lot of credit for this, he stepped back, and he said, "It's time for me to move on," and handed over the reins of that project as it continued on. It was a very sad and emotional day for us, but in retrospect, when I look back, I really give him a lot of credit for saying, you know what, it's time for me to step back, because he was losing his passion for it. He had a lot of passion for setting it up and getting it going, but then as it became operational, and as it became, as it started to move towards, we're rolling and establishing, because Sarbanes-Oxley it's a yearly certification. He recognized that it is time for him to move on. So if we don't show that unwavering support. So that kind of raises a second question, though, around what happens, or what do we do as PMs, as project managers, when we don't support the project, when we're looking at it going, yeah, I'm not really feeling it. I'm not there. So I'm going to go off script a little bit here and pose that question to you. As a follow-up to Sabir's show unwavering support, what do we do when we don't have the unwavering support, or when we don't have the passion? What should we do? Beautiful, Sarah. I love it. Find a new job. Yeah, and you know what? That's actually some good advice. Yeah. So, if we can step outside of PM for a moment, I mean, you spend the majority of your waking hours at your job. You should be passionate about it. You should enjoy it. And I know that can be a very difficult thing to do, especially when there's that whole, am I going to find another job? And there's a huge fear in taking that step. But yeah, I mean, maybe perhaps you're not the best PM for this project. And I know personally I have a lot of respect for someone who stands up and says to their sponsor, you know what, yeah, I can run this project for you, but just not feeling it. So yeah, it might be time to look for a different project to run. Any other thoughts on that? What should we do if we don't have the passion? Okay, I'm going to give you one more sip of tea. I'm fighting a little bit of a cold today, so my cold stop tea is helping. So some of the things that I'd recommend you do is really question why we're doing this project. So raise that question, go investigate it. Maybe go have a chat with the sponsor, with decision makers who approve the project. Try to look at it from a different angle, and really just investigate, what is it about it that's not giving you that passion, and really kind of figure out, and we talk about this when we talk in terms of change management. You either need to get it or, move on, kind of thing. So, kind of look at it from a fresh set of eyes, and maybe look at it from a bigger scope or a bigger scale perspective or a bigger context. It might not be beneficial for you in your team, in your corner of the world, but maybe there's a greater good here that, is kind of helping with that. Oh, lovely. Another one, check and see if you have some sort of biases, right? And there's lots of cognitive biases that start to come into play there, as well as past experiences, the whole once bitten, twice shy piece, all of that. So yeah, some really good advice there. Beautiful. Come on, move on. There we go. Okay. I would be remiss if we did not touch on the project side of things. So last session we talked about baselining. We baselined our cost, our scope, our schedule, and talking about this in terms of bookends, where we have the plan on one end and then the leadership on the other. And if I don't have both, it kind of doesn't work. So I really need to have kind of both of those pieces there. And when we think in terms of that, especially if I focus down on the project or the plan side, what effectively got is we have a contract. And we've contracted with our sponsor, our major stakeholders, that we're going to deliver X within a given time period, within a given cost. So when there's changes to that, we need to definitely make sure that those changes are well managed, and hence the process is going to really help with that. And this is, I think, one of the biggest areas where process is going to be very effective is the change control, project change control, or change request. So dealing with that. Okay. So let's just jump into our case study for a few moments. As you remember, Acme Corporation, will revisit them. They've decided to sell sell off the jet-powered roller skate division, and hence they're going to relocate. Main objectives here was to reduce dollars. There was also some constraints around it, such as minimal interruptions, as well as helping the staff with the transition. So now we're into execution. It's time to pack up the boxes and move. So let's take a look at what are some of the things that were done that helped with that whole hedgehog concept. Now, let's going to run through this list for a moment, and then we're going to kind of come back to this and talk a little bit about what each of those pieces are. So hire movers, hire renovators, pre-tour the new office, pack our own stuff, and have a party with games and prizes and so forth. So for those of you who have been through a move, it can be kind of daunting. And what we tend to do, and I know especially me, I'm one of those do-it-myself type people. If we do a personal move, moving house, we tend to move ourselves, or we go find our buddy who has a truck, and that kind of thing. Being the guy who grew up with a pickup truck in the family, by the way, I think I moved a lot of people in my high school days. All right. So what did we do for this one? Well, we hired movers. Now let's think about that in terms of our hedgehog. Who here is passionate about moving? Who here wants to go and slug boxes in a 12-hour day and, unpack everything and pack it? People don't want to do this, right? We're not passionate about it. Now, the next question is the Acme Jet Roller Skate Company good at moving? Are they number one in the world at that? No, and it doesn't drive their economic engine, so this totally doesn't make sense. Same thing with the renovators. It doesn't fit your hedgehog. And this is where you notice a lot of really effective organizations and effective people, they'll be very clear about what they will do and what they won't do. Because what they're basically saying is, I'm not passionate about it, I'm not good at it, and it doesn't really make me money. So you know what, I'm going to go do what I do really well. I'm going to go do what I want to do and where I can make money. And then, by the way, now that I've made that money, I can pay people to do those other things. So hence we hire movers, we hire renovators. Now, the pre-tour of the new office. This is a really key thing, and this goes back to passion, because now we're getting into some change management. Now we're getting into fear of the unknown. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but you move offices and there's lots of questions. Oh, where are we going? What's the address? What's the new office look like? How much space am I going to have? Is my desk going to be bigger? Is it going to be smaller? What does all that look like? So go answer a lot of those questions and have a pre-tour. Now, pack our own stuff. Why would we want to pack our own stuff? Well, people are very passionate about their stuff. So you know what? It's actually better if I do pack my own stuff because I'm good at it, right? We're good at packing our own stuff. It gives us an opportunity to throw things out. I could have movers come in and pack up people's desks for them, but probably not going to have a good result there. And then finally, have a party, right? Celebrate the successes. Maybe have some games, have some prizes, make it fun. Moving is not a fun experience. If you look at the top 10 stressors in life, moving's right up there. When you talk about what is it, death of a family, change of a job, and moving house, I think are kind of the top 3. Oh yeah, and then speaking in public is up there as well. So most people do not like moving. So you know what? Let's make it a little bit fun, because I'll tell you something. We enjoy stuff that's fun, right? That's why we call it fun. So if we make it a little bit of play, we make it a little bit more inviting, we can create a little bit more of that towards towards reaction than away. I saw this brilliant TED Talk on this subject by Derry Latimer, and she was talking about she was talking about that whole concept of the towards and away. And so she started her TED Talk by doing the opposite game, right? You say a word, and then everyone shouts out the opposites, black, white, day, night, that kind of thing. And she shouted out the opposite. She said, "Well, what's the opposite of play?" And everyone said, "Work." And it's like, okay, well, we kind of need to update that a little bit, right? And if we can make work more like play, it'll be much more enjoyable. And I mean, you hear lots of motivational speakers and successful people talking and saying, they enjoy their work. But that's a pretty key common thing, and that kind of goes back to that whole passion piece, right? So yeah, so cool. Okay, so some key points to take out of this. Now, track your project. And notice in the session we didn't go into, hey, let's create this form and let's go into the details. And you're going to do that for sure, but track your project, okay, and whatever that looks like. Now, the subtitle here was plan for tracking your project, which is actually the bullets. So all the sub-bullets here were the bullets from last time, right, when we did our baselining. So really it's all about, we're now going to use that. So track your project. So when you're planning, make sure you've got the tools, mechanisms, as I like to say, having the instruments installed. Transition from planning to execution, right? My wife, she's a fabulous lady. She loves to plan. She loves to research. She has trouble transitioning from planning into execution. Now, fortunately, I'm the exact opposite. I like to execute, and I'm actually kind of not as good at the planning side. So my approach, my natural approach is jump in and we'll figure it out as we go. Her natural approach is let's plan, and then we'll plan some more. So as a team together, we actually work really, really well together because we balance each other off. So she helps me kind of in the whoa cowboy mode, and I help her in the giddy up mode. Look at the complete picture. Last month we looked at earned value, getting that complete picture and what does that look like. And then read and react to the indicators. And again, this is one of those pet peeves of mine where people, they gather the data, but then they don't react to the data. So you got to be looking at those instruments. You've got to be looking at what it's telling you, and reacting appropriately. Okay. So some additional key points around the hedgehog. So that's more on the technical side, on the procedural side. Let's take a look more on the leadership side. Support and create and support the passion. Okay, and we actually talked a little bit about how we can go about doing that. Assemble the best team. Get the right skills. And we talked about this in step 3 when we talked in terms of roles, responsibilities. Get the right people on the bus. Make sure you assemble the best people you can. And when you don't have those people in-house, now it's time to bring them in from outside, and whatever that looks like, whether that's in the form of training up the team that you have, or bringing in outside contractors to actually do the work, etc. And then finally, align to the strategic objectives. If the project is not producing benefit for the organization, it's not going to move forward. You're not going to get the support. So really, ask that question: what drives your economic engine within your project? Why are we doing this? Okay. So we're going to finish up. Again, we'll revisit our quote. When you can't fight or flee, you flow. And it's a very interesting story if you want to do a little bit of research on Edie and kind of look into her story, or pick up the book, The Survivor's Guide. Forget the gentleman's name. It's Ben something or other. But anyways, if you Google it, if you have trouble, just fire me an email and I'm happy to direct you. If you can't fight or flee, flow. And I thought this was very appropriate in the PM context, because much like Edie in the concentration camp, she had no authority. She had zero authority. In fact, her fate was really at the whim of the people running the camp. As PMs, we're definitely not in that situation, thankfully, but we're often in the situation where we don't have a lot of authority. We have very limited authority, or we're kind of at the whim of senior management. We're at the whim of our stakeholders, our sponsors, our clients. We need to go with the flow, but we also need to make sure that we manage expectations, and where we can, we influence. So look for those opportunities. They may be small, they may seem insignificant, but they can mean the survival of the project and getting us to that end state.